Hi teachers, I want to show you how to use the iNaturalist website and app so that you can create a project for your students to make observations and study biodiversity. So first of all, in order to make a project, you need to have an iNaturalist account and you have to have had at least 50 observations made. So if you are not a user of iNaturalist, it's not very hard to get those 50 observations. Just take observations when you are walking your dogs or your house plants, or go out in your yard and see what kind of plants and insects and animals you might have around. You might surprise yourself with how much biodiversity is in your life. But once you get those 50 observations, you're going to go to the iNaturalist website like I have here. And this is the main page of the website. Once you're logged in, you will go over to the far right here in projects. If you are a user of iNaturalist, whatever projects you are in will be listed here. Since we want to make a project, you would go here to start a project. And it's going to bring you to the option of doing collection or umbrella. If you are making just one project for your students, like you are only going to one location at one time, then you should only ever do a collection project. An umbrella project, you take multiple projects and you will look at how the statistics compare across multiple projects. You may want to get into that later on if you really start to use iNaturalist frequently and over several years in your classes. But for this first time, I would highly recommend just going to the collection project here and you'll click Get Started. Now, I would name your project something that is very identifiable for your students, something like the name of your school and the year or your name of your class. But certainly make it something that you will be able to find easily and that will identify when and where this is happening. So I could say something like my high school, and we will do April 2022, since that is about our time. And if you're going to make multiple projects in one year, say if you're going to follow the lesson plan where you are taking two locations and you're comparing the biodiversity in two different locations, you would also want to label this with which location you are going to. So I may put this as the school grounds. And make sure to display your project name. That will make it much easier for your students to find. If you want to make a picture or an icon or a banner for your project, you can. Again, I would choose something that would help your students identify your project quickly. And then put a brief project summary here. So you could talk about the school grounds that you are going to have your students make observations. It could be the park where they're going to be making observations, or you could simply just write a quick set of instructions for your students. Now, as we scroll down, again, keep this as a collection type project. If you want your students to observe any kind of creatures or plants in that area, then leave this blank and include taxa. This will mean that it will allow any taxa. If you want to have them specifically search for something like plants, then you can simply type plants in here and select plants kingdom or vascular plants, flowering plants, whichever you prefer. I would suggest keeping it completely blank so that your students can really explore any and all species that are in the areas that they are surveying. For places, I would at least put the city that you are in. If you want to make it more specific, you can. And users, if your students have already made an account and you have their usernames, you can enter them here and you can automatically enroll them in your project. If you have not had them already make an account or you don't know their usernames, you can leave this blank and they will add themselves to the project. And I would leave this project members only. This box is for restricting this project to only the people who have joined. I would leave this closed if you want to make sure that no one is going to jump in on your project, although I don't imagine that would be much of an issue for your school grounds one. Maybe if you go to a well known park where people might join projects so that they can record the biodiversity of the park for themselves. Um, so you can leave this open or closed depending on how popular you think that area that they're going to survey will be. With annotations, unless this is something that will be highly useful for your specific lesson, I would leave this blank. But the annotation would allow them to make observations only if it fits a certain attribute. So, say only if it is in a certain life stage, or if you are looking for evidence of its presence, like a footprint or a hoof print. Your data quality. If you want your students to have easy access to a identification, I would leave the research grade, needs ID, and also click casual, because casual means that it will allow really any picture. And as we all know as teachers, our students are not always the best at taking quality pictures when it's something for a actual assignment and not for their personal media. Media type, I would allow any. This would allow students to take pictures of any plants, animals that they may see, and it has a sound option open, so if they want to take a recording of birds in the area, it may even record the biodiversity of that, or record that species and add to their biodiversity. Establishment means you can click this if you want your students to only be able to find the native or the introduced, which is also includes the invasive species. I would again leave this to any so that you can really record the most biodiverse area, get the most number of species that they could find. For your date, this should be, if you want this to be an exact date, as in maybe your school ground survey, if you are only having them go out one day, then you can put that exact date in. If you want it to be more of a range, then you would click any here, or you would have a range here, and you can click that start and end date. So if you are assigning them to go to a park for homework, then you can leave that, say you want them to go anywhere from the Monday to Friday at the park, then you have that range available, and they will not be able to make observations outside of those times. And you can make it even more open if you want to, with allowing just months. But that is, again, up to you and how you decide to assign this to your students. For members, there are observations where people may want to hide their coordinates, whether it's for a privacy or a safety issue. I would, since you are only doing this for classroom purposes and you're not trying to find high quality research grade observations, I would not leave this box. I would just leave this blank. Do not click that. And lastly is admins. These are the people who will be able to edit anything and see anything about the project details. The only people that should be added here is potentially other teachers if you have multiple teachers collaborating on the same project. Otherwise, I would leave this blank so that you are the only person that could change this. And when you are happy with your project, you would click done and it will create your project for you. For students to find your project, they would go to either their app or the website and they would log in and they could go to projects and do a search of your projects, or do search of projects in order to find. So go to all projects here and they could search whatever you had done. So if you did my high school school grounds 2022, then they would be able to find it here and join. To summarize, one of the biggest advantages of creating a BioBlitz is that it creates an event in the app where students can collect as much data as possible in a short amount of time in a specific area. So if you want them to be able to look and compare the biodiversity of two distinct areas, that BioBlitz will confine all of that data for that one specific spot, such as a park or your school grounds. And second advantage of BioBlitz is that the iNaturalist app will record all the observations for your students, so they don't have to remember things or write things down. They can't forget it. They can't lose their data sheet. It will all be collected for you and saved on the app. You also can revisit this data if you want to extend the project to compare biodiversity in different seasons. Say if you would like to start this in the fall and you do it in school grounds in the beginning of the school year and then repeat it in the winter or the spring to see if the biodiversity changes over the school year. Or if you wanted to do this project again next year and see if the biodiversity changes from year to year, then you can revisit this data as much as you like. I will highly recommend here with number 4, you need to create a new project for each location and collection period. If you are going to have students collect somewhere such as a park, then you need to make a Bioblitz project for just that park. If you decide to have them make observations in their houses or their gardens at home, you should have to make a new project for each student. So I would not recommend doing a project where they just look at their yards and compare biodiversity of their yards unless you have a new project for each student. If you make one BioBlitz project and call it a collective yards, then it would unfairly show their yards as a diverse area because each yard is a different location and each location could have more or a different mix of species in it. You also will need to make a new Bioblitz project for each collection period. So if you do want to make a project where you visit an area in the fall and then again in the spring, you'll need to make a new Bioblitz project, or else you are really comparing two of the same. You won't be able to make a comparison because you're looking at the same thing. You're trying to put your data into the same chart. So make 2 projects to compare to different locations if you're following that lesson plan. And if you want to repeat collection in different seasons or years, then you'll need to make a new project. And I hope you all have fun with the Bioblitz project and the iNaturalist app. And good luck to your students to investigate biodiversity.